Wonderful. So today's topic is Shadow Priestess, unseen and unloved shadows. So we're actually talking about shadow work, some of the things that we can witch through, what it looks like, what it feels like when we're going through these shadows. And originally I was going to do a slightly different topic, but this came up for me quite hardcore since the Pluto-Saturn conjunction. Has definitely been something which is mulling around in my head, and I know other people have been feeling this way too. So I was talking to Chris earlier, and tomorrow is Chris Ashburn's birthday, so make sure you love bomb her wall tomorrow. And the spirits spoke to me as I was talking through some things, and they actually brought up one of my poems, and so the spirits are very much like, girl, listen to your own words, with a kind of girl. And so it is Dark and Beautiful Queen. The poem I'm going to read for you guys is actually in Songs of Shades Volume 3, and it deals with this topic and some of the energies around it. So we're going to read it. We're going to set the tone for the video with this poem, channeled work, invocation style goodness. So, okay. O dark and beautiful queen, I cannot convince you that you are worth more than the lashings of tongues which seek to scale your flesh, more than the pinprick of your own inner critic that slides that sharp metal point under your ribs till the membrane leaks out. As all ink fades on the page and you barely remember your marks, for every balm I seek to place there merely stings, searing truth into vacuous spaces, murmurings of the underneaths and beneaths, those depths to which only we plummet, hurtling headfirst in solidarity and earnest seeking. I will hold up a mirror lined and cracked with salt and age, but shining nonetheless with all of your power. See, I ask you. See beyond what they have taught you, how you have caved into their designs and made yourself a smaller shelter which is not your home. Burn bright with the weirdness that inks itself into your skin and cries forth a banshee's lament. For we stand here for the hurting, for the broken, for the lost. You are not alone, and we shall not be afraid. So this is the Dark and Beautiful Queen, and it covers areas of shadow work, of feeling not enough, of feeling not seen, of feeling not loved. And no matter what we do not feel recognized in some fashion. And I wanted to talk about that in terms of being a spiritual practitioner, however you wish to give yourself the title, whether it be witch or spiritual practitioner or magician or whatever it is. Spiritual seekers, I feel that as we go through these unseen and unloved shadows, a lot of us can actually feel guilty. A lot of us can feel ashamed that we go through these shadows of self because we are aware of ourselves. We do the work, and sometimes we feel it's our responsibility to lead forward in a community, in the spiritual community, to put our best foot forward and say, this is how we find strength. This is how we find a community. This is how we build together. And I feel like a lot of us feel the added element of feeling, ashamed of having shadows, of not feeling seen and not feeling loved. And usually they're a conjunction of both. That we don't feel recognized, we don't feel understood. There is a expectation in spiritual communities, whether they be online, whether they be in person, that you are to be this person, you are fulfilling this role to people. And that happens to all of us, regardless of what roles we actually fill. And it can feel like disappointing people constantly, or people's impression of who you ought to be, as if you can't have moments where you feel low or weak or sad or whatever that might be. And so I can talk to you today about how I personally experience these things. That is the scope of my experience. That is the thing that I am qualified to talk about, because I have experienced it. I know sometimes people watch these videos and feel like, well, you're just talking about yourself and your own shadows. And yes, I think that is the responsible thing to do. I can tell you how I've experienced these things, how I feel about these things, how I cope with these things, and hopefully there is some nugget of truth or connectivity within that you can connect to, that strikes a chord within you, and maybe something that has worked for me will help other people work through their shadows at the same time. So for me, it's it's a lifelong feeling of not feeling recognized and not feeling loved, not feeling that anything that I do is ever enough. And that was bred into me from a very young age. And now I'm trying to unpick that as I go forward, because there are situations, being in the spiritual community, whereby people definitely come at you. Anybody who's ever been online, who's ever spoken about things that matter to them, know that the troll comments are inevitable. They know that people disagreeing with them is inevitable, but the way that some people go about it is hurtful, because the anonymity of the internet allows people to indulge themselves in the worst behaviors if they so wish. And so when you step out into this platform and you're talking about things that matter on a heart level, on a soul level, you are immediately inviting people to misunderstand you. You are immediately inviting people to judge you. And it's not necessarily something we go into eyes wide open or expect, but it is definitely something that happens, that occurs. And I always warn people now. They say, what's the one piece of advice you give someone going on YouTube or whatever it might be? And I'm like, expect the worst, like hope for the best, expect for the worst, and prepare yourself not to try and take it too much to heart, because it can be a struggle. It can make you feel unloved, and no matter how well you express yourself, somebody out there in the world is committed to taking the wrong thing from what you've said, because of the way you speak, because of the vernacular language that you use, because of how you present yourself, because of the way you look. Some people will immediately take the wrong message, no matter how well you think you put your statement. I talked about this recently in the blog post, Shadow Priestessing, Shadow Poker, because I feel like I constantly poke other people's shadows. And Chris said earlier, but you have to take with that you also illuminate shadows, in that you have to also and do show people a way of healing, and that it's okay to experience these shadows and feel these shadows and kind of witch through them. And so that's kind of what we're doing today in today's live. So unlovable shadows are tough and they are insidious, because all human beings, well, okay, 99% of human beings seek out and want to be loved. It's a factor that we all share. We want to feel loved. We want to feel celebrated. We want to feel welcomed. We want to feel seen. Now, a lot of people might not think that the seen is a bigger deal to them, because us introverts, and yes, I'm definitely more introverted than I am extroverted. Sometimes don't like being out there and in the world and being seen as much. And that's not the same thing as wanting to feel seen for who we are. So we all handle the idea of being seen and the shadows that come with it in very different ways. And a shadow of not feeling seen is maybe you are seen, but you don't feel seen for who you truly are. And there are a lot of things that get in the way of how people understand us. And I've already said there are definitely going to be people committed to misunderstanding you regardless. There are going to be people who take what you say, run with it, hate it, for reasons all of their own, which is usually very little to do with you. And if you poke somebody else's shadow, you will know. You will know about it. And the best thing that I can honestly say has worked for me is deciding where and when a response is necessary or merited or worth your time and energy. Because if you honestly show up to every battle you're invited to, you're just going to lose. And it took me a really long time, and I still sometimes struggle with it, to let go of responding to other people's shadows. And it may be that they feel unseen and they feel unloved at the same time that they're kind of venting at you for something that you said, because they have a different opinion and you don't hold the same opinion. And so they're trying to prove to you their opinion so that their opinion is therefore validated in some way. Or so, sometimes people get super arrogant with it, trying to like hold opinions over other people because they need to be right. And that's again part of this shadow of being unseen. And I think it's a really easy trap to fall into. In my own mind, when people are when I have put something forth as a discussion point, I don't mind alternative opinions. I kind of mind when people start name calling or being really rude. It doesn't sit well with me, and my inner I don't know if it's an English person or whatever goes. I don't mind a well-presented argument like, have you considered blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't mind that at all. Debate, yes please, yummy. But when, oh, you're stupid and here's why, I'm immediately like riled up, and I have to learn not to respond to it, because I don't come off the best when I feel that immediate, you are refusing to see me shadow and you're demanding that I see you at the same time. It's a really weird intermeshing of shadows that happens. And I think in those situations, the best response is no response at all. It's sometimes it's not worth your life force. It's better to conserve your energy, just like hands off and walk away from it, because it's not giving you anything. It's not nourishing you. It's not going to nourish them. It's just an argument waiting to happen that doesn't really serve anything. Now, it's different with people you know and love. That's completely different. That's a different situation. That merits a conversation at least. But when it's just people that perhaps you don't know so well, I've come to find that the best response is none. And what I've gotten into habit with on places like YouTube or online is the first time, depending on what is said, if it's super vile, then obviously block and delete. But if it's a good step down from that, if it's just a little bit confrontational, I've tried the first response being upbeat, happy and informative. And if it continues to try and drain and sap that from you, then non-engagement. I feel like we don't talk enough about you don't owe anyone. And it's really difficult in the shadows of feeling unseen and feeling unloved, because you want people to like you. And that's the underlying pinning thing of both. You want to be liked. You want to be a likable person. And I can't tell you the number of times I have personally struggled thinking that I am the unlikable one. Oh, see? that the way I come across is unlikable, or that people will, you know, just not like me and there's all sorts of shadows behind that. Those are my responsibility to try and heal and deal with. But there definitely is that immediate people-pleasing response that comes up because I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be disliked. I don't want to feel like the outsider, which is kind of the energy that I end up sitting in because I naturally align there. I naturally align with the outsider witch. I naturally much quieter when meeting people. I tend to absorb like a sponge. And I prefer small groups where I can talk in depth rather than mass groups. And it's part of being quite introverted, like I said. But these are definitely where some of these shadows come in. I don't know if Facebook is updating for messages, by the way. I'm not seeing any. So apologies if anyone has said anything, because I can't see any of it. And so when those shadows come in, we have to look at ways of dealing with them, about how that best heals ourselves. And knowing ourselves is usually the first step to healing why we feel unloved, why we feel unseen, and asking ourselves, particularly with the unseen element, why that is important to us. Where does it come from? And that can be a whole lot of unpacking for a whole host of different reasons. And people are commenting, and it is not showing me goodness. Right, so let's just click back on here and see. Okay. And so what does it mean? How do we do that? How do we witch through it? How do we reconnect with liking ourselves and seeing ourselves first, so that we can shine for all of our idiosyncrasies, for all of our faults and failings, such as they are, so that we can shine our imperfect light out into the world, so that other imperfect lights can find us, because we're all human. And I definitely feel that some of the online presence with regards to life, the presentation on social media of the perfect life, has done a lot to cause some of these shadows to really boil and bubble up through seeing the idea of how other people live, feel, enjoy the basking of all the attention of all their friends and followers and whatever it is, and they seem so happy. And what really served me really well in these situations is the line, do not compare your behind the scenes to somebody else's on stage, because you don't know how staged or theatrical it actually is. Also, you are not responsible to live up to somebody else's idea of you. Just embody yourself as much as you can. Do the work on you, the shadow work on you as much as you can, and as much depth as you can, and do your best. And honestly, I think that doing your best shines through. Like, talking about the fact that these situations are tough, they stink, they suck. And when shadows kind of rear their heads again with this, it can be super difficult. It can feel isolating, and you want to isolate as a result, because at the same time, you don't really want to tell people you feel this way. You don't want to put that on other people, because it feels like dumping on them. And then they're definitely not going to like you, right? Because you're just miserable and you just dumped all this emotional difficulty on people. And it can really suck to get into those cycles of feeling not enough and feeling unseen, and then not knowing how to cope. Now, for some people, obviously counseling or therapist is definitely an answer, and it's not something we should be ashamed of. It is something that we should normalize and we should talk about it. You know, if you need to speak to a professional, then you should. Right, absolutely. And I've always said that I feel like spiritual work goes hand in hand with the medical professions, all of them. And it's not something to be excluded from, because it's not like just spiritual work is going to see you through with the exclusion of whichever medical professional field you require. It's a harmony, it's a symphony, it's everything together, hand in hand. But from the spiritual perspective, I think for me, journaling the cycles of the shadow cycles really helps, and really letting out those feelings, because in one moment you can definitely feel abandoned by the world, you can definitely feel triggered by certain situations, and I think that's worth talking a little bit about. There are definitely situations where we can feel triggered by actions of other people. Maybe somebody has triggered a shadow of ours, and then we're in this weird limbo space of, is it entirely my fault because it's my shadow? And we're looking at ourselves, not knowing whether or not we should be holding other people to account, not sure if our boundary should go up there. It can be a very difficult situation to fully comprehend. And so we have to remember that sometimes people are just awful, and sometimes things are not okay. Sometimes people doing certain things is not okay. And the thing that gets to me perhaps more than anything is lying. If someone is lying to me, I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with it at all, because I will tell you flat. I try and tell people flat out how I feel. I try and be as honest as possible. Sometimes I'm silent for a peaceful life, which I shouldn't do. But that's another shadow that I'm unpacking, which is that it's an inbuilt fear of saying anything, because then the worst happens. Usually standing up for myself. But again, that's a shadow of working through. But when it comes to not being liked or not being loved, a lot of us keep our mouths shut. And sometimes we really shouldn't. We can learn to express ourselves in ways that aren't aggressive, in ways that don't blame. I think that's a really important lesson to learn it's very instinctual to say, you did this, blame, blame, blame. And it's not helpful. All it does is raises hostility and in you and in the other person. So I tend to try and express myself calmly, collectedly, and say that I feel this way because of this situation, and I didn't like the way this was phrased or this was said. I try and work like that, if it matters enough for me, because as I said, we shouldn't get into in-depth soul sharing with every single person who's a jackass, right? Because some people just don't merit the time or energy or effort, and if you flat out lie to me, then I'm done, pretty much. I don't know about other people, that's my line, and I stick to it. And it really does bug me. So when it comes to those moments, we have to be careful that our shadows of feeling unloved and unseen aren't getting in the way of standing up for ourselves, because they're sneaky like that. They can make us feel like we can't be assertive. And there's a difference, obviously, between assertive and aggressive. And although I'm not sure how many people have issues with not being seen if they're being aggressive, because you're certainly being seen then, not for the right reasons probably, but hey, there's a time and a place for anger. I've said that before, and how you express yourself in those moments is entirely your own, but you live with the consequences of your actions. So that's true too. So the main piece of advice for this shadow, I think, is to check in regularly with yourself, is to do the work of unpacking a shadow, where it comes from. And if it helps to write it out, then do that. If it helps to speak to someone, then do that, or both. Or just sometimes it helps to just sit in the feeling, honor the feeling, sit in that moment of feeling shoddy. This is what I always recommend, because a lot of shadow lessons are kind of like how to cope and move on. But I feel like we need to sit in it to understand it for a bit. Not for too long, to the point where it becomes all encompassing and is doing you damage and you can't move away from it. But certainly to feel it in its entirety, to understand the intricacies of the emotional web you have woven around this shadow. And then you can start to see the gaps between and let the light shine in, or however you see hope coming in, however you visualize that. And as we better understand it, so we better understand ourselves and we can make friends with it. Sometimes the only thing that is needed to shift it is a shift in how you speak to yourself internally. Forgive yourself for feeling that way. Give yourself a moment to feel it. Forgive yourself for feeling it. And then talk to yourself as if you were talking to your best friend or a small child or somebody you love. Because it's so easy to beat ourselves up and tell ourselves we're unlovable and unlikable and nobody likes us. Nobody sees us. People go out of their way so that we are not seen. And maybe some people do, but ultimately that means more about them than it does about you. And so we have to honor ourselves as whole, complete beings, and then go about ways to honor ourselves, to celebrate ourselves. Where do you shine? How can you show that more to the world? How can you shine more? How can you be more true to what you want to be, who you want to be, and how you want to be out on the platform of the world? Because ultimately, I think when we step out into the world, nobody is seeing the entirety of us because it's not possible. You're so complicated in your own head that most people aren't even going to get half of that. They're not going to get the entirety of your portrait. They're not going to see the colors, the weave, the weft. They're not going to understand the paper beneath. Some people will definitely take the time, and they're keepers. They're the roots at the bottom of the tree. And some other people are just leaves, coming and going by the seasons. So we're going to let them go. But what are the things that anchor us? What are the things that ground us? What are the things that truly mean something to us and that we love? Because the more we engage with things that we love, the more it will shine through us that we love them. And the more we engage with love, the less unlovable we will feel. I feel hippy dippy as a shippy right now, but it's true. The more we engage with that passion of self, the less people's negative opinions of us matter. Honestly, you have to hold yourself to account too. It's not obviously an excuse to be an arsehole, although we can all be arseholes, let's be real. We can all be mean. We all have bad days. We can all lose our tempers. But how we get up, carry on, and move on from that point is the most important bit of all. And I know that we can all do whatever it is that we need to do to get back on our feet and show the world that we love ourselves first. We see ourselves first, and we're pretty great, really. So let's sit down and have a conversation. Let's have fun. Let's share something beautiful. Whatever it is that makes our hearts sing and shine, let's do that. So that's it for this live, guys. Thank you for being with me. Sorry we're a day late. No idea if people are commenting. It's frozen up again. I'll probably get around to it later and find that 20 people have commented at the time, which I haven't seen. Hello. Thank you for being with me if you've commented as such. Thank you for showing up, being here. Many blessings, guys. And I should be here tomorrow at some point later on to do the 2 OM pull, card pull. The first 2 people will get a free OM reading who show up, and then we'll do question and answers tomorrow. So this would usually be on Wednesday. We're on Thursday because of unforeseen circumstances. Such is my life. Many blessings, guys, and I will catch you next time.